Victron Updates 2026. Let's go. My name is Kaza Gomes with Trek Systems. Joining us today, we have Dan Birkbeck and Peter Roach. A quick look at our agenda for today. So we've got a number of new products to look at, platform updates across VRM and Victron Connect, new capabilities related to microgrids and digital switching, and then some other exciting news for Trek Systems and Victron in 2026. We will be saving Q&A for the end, but feel free to post questions in the chat as they come up. We'll keep track of those. Stick around for a gift that we'll share at the end following Q&A. And with that, we are incredibly excited to announce the launch of our all-in-one Victron mounting platform, trekMount. This has been over a year in the making, and we built this because we kept hearing the request for an all-in-one plug-and-play Victron system. End users want to save space, installers want to save time, and pretty much everyone wants to use the most reliable and cutting-edge equipment without being boxed into a one-size-fits-all product. This is a 15-second promo clip, and really we're just trying to illustrate that this is a modular mounting bracket. It works with over 40 components, and installation is very straightforward. Our two standard options today are trekMount Solo, which is a bracket with threaded mounting holes for all of the common components typically used in a Victron system. Basically, you bring your own components, mount and wire them up on a bench with our bracket, and then install the full system. The second option is trekMount Ready. And this is truly plug-and-play version. Everything is already mounted, wired, programmed, and tested. So once it arrives, you make some final connections and you're ready to roll. We'll go ahead and drop a link in the chat to the product page in case anyone wants to learn more about that. Last thing related to trekMount, in addition to trekMount Solo and Ready, we now offer a design, engineering, and production service called trekMount OEM. This is a turnkey service for OEMs and fleet operators. Basically, we work with your team to understand the operational requirements. Then we determine the system architecture, the energy, the connectivity, monitoring, and controls. And then based on the space that's available, we design a custom mounting platform. We've already had successful launches with OEMs, and if this piques your interest, you can send an email to info@trek.systems to learn more. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dan for product updates from Victron.
All right. Thanks, Kaza. So Victron has expanded their inverter charger lineup with several new models, including the MultiPlus 48-volt 20K 230-volt, now their largest single inverter charger. They've also introduced new 4500-watt and 6500-watt models. The 230-volt versions are available now, with the 120-volt models expected in the second half of 2026. One important change, these new units are rated in watts instead of volt amps. That update will eventually roll out across the full inverter charger range to better reflect real output power. There's also a new MultiPlus 2 12-volt 4 kVA at 230 volts, delivering 3,400 watts continuous, plus new 12 and 24-volt 1600 VA VE Direct standalone inverters. On the 120-volt side, there's a compliance change. To meet UL requirements in North America, 120-volt inverter chargers will now be fixed at 60 hertz. No more 50 and 60 hertz switching on UL-listed models. This is already in place for the 48-volt units. For non-UL applications, Victron will still offer switchable 50-60 hertz models. Currently, the 48-volt 5K MultiPlus and 10K Quattro, with more to follow. And finally, Victron is developing a standalone 120-240-volt split-phase inverter charger, delivering true split phase from a single unit instead of requiring two units to be stacked. They've also introduced a new microgrid functionality for battery-based systems, which we'll cover shortly.
Hey, real quick, I just want to jump in on this. 50, 60 hertz thing. So the idea that's mainly applicable for folks who may use their system in other countries. In the US, in North America, we use 60 hertz. In Europe, they use 50 hertz. And so there are some applications, mainly boats, in some cases, expedition vehicles, if they're being transported overseas. But in these types of systems, they, in some cases, need to have an inverter that can switch between 50 and 60 hertz. So just wanted to kind of share that context.
Thanks, Kaza. Another exciting new product is the new Victron Lithium SuperPack NG batteries. This is the next evolution of Victron's Lithium SuperPack batteries with new features, including a built-in battery management system and battery monitor, integrated heating for charging below freezing, an on-off switch for safe off-season storage, and a new safety vent for gas discharge, all of which we'll get into a little more in the coming slides. Here you can see the dimensions of the new 12-volt 100 amp hour SuperPack compared to the older SuperPack 12-volt 100 amp hour battery and the Lithium NG 100 amp hour battery. As you can see, the new SuperPack NG is about 35% smaller than the existing SuperPack battery. The height dimensions are compatible with BCI Group 49 standards. This makes the SuperPack NG ideal for replacement in standard battery compartments. Let's dig a little deeper into what's new with the SuperPack NG. One of the biggest additions is the built-in self-heating function. This keeps the battery above the minimum safe charging temperature so you don't run into cold weather charging issues. You got two heating modes in Victron Connect. The default is charger mode. In this mode, the heater only runs when a charger is connected and the battery is actively charging. If the cell temperature drops below freezing, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, the heater turns on automatically. The second option is auto mode. In this case, the battery will power its own heater to keep the cells above freezing, even if no charger is connected. Just keep in mind this uses stored energy in the battery, so once it reaches the configured low SOC threshold, the heater shuts off. Another nice addition, similar to the Lynx BMS, is the adjustable discharge floor. You can set this in Victron Connect to prevent the battery from fully discharging. This helps avoid deep discharge and BMS shutdown, which would take the entire system offline. It's especially useful in applications where recharge timing isn't guaranteed. On the mechanical side, like the Lithium NG batteries, these include molded ridges for hold-down clamps, so no straps required. There's also a pressure relief safety tube for controlled gas release in extreme fault conditions. This should never be blocked or used for any other purpose. You've got a physical on-off push button that disables both charging and discharging. When switched off, the battery enters storage mode with less than 3% self-discharge per month. And finally, two built-in LEDs give you status for Bluetooth, warnings or alarms, and firmware updates. Another new feature is the external feedback signal, or EFS. The SuperPack NG includes an M12 single-pole connector that outputs a simple on-off signal. The EFS functions similarly to the ATD, ATC, or allow to discharge, allow to charge outputs on Victron BMS units. Can be used to energize an external relay, trigger a visual or audible alarm, or control devices with remote on-off inputs such as a battery protect, solar charger, or Orion XS. The EFS activates when the configured low SOC warning threshold is reached in Victron Connect and stays active until SOC rises above that threshold. The wiring diagram here illustrates an example using the EFS to control a battery protect with its remote on-off port. Some limitations of the SuperPack NG batteries to note. There are no built-in GX device communications. Monitoring is done via Bluetooth in Victron Connect only. They can't be connected in series for 24-volt or 48-volt systems. Future version, though, the SuperPack NG with CAN will support GX device and VRM integration and allow series configurations. Here we can see the full range of Victron's SuperPack NG batteries and their expected availability. The 12-volt 100 amp hour, 200 amp hour, and the 24-volt 100 amp hour batteries are expected to be available by end of Q1, with larger 24-volt, 200 amp hour, and 48-volt 100 amp hour models planned to follow in Q2. The next iteration of these batteries, the SuperPack NG with CAN, are expected sometime in the second half of this year. So the Victron Lithium NG BMS lineup has expanded. Just as a reminder, an NG BMS is required when installing Victron NG lithium batteries. The newest addition is the Smart BMS NG 12200. This is the next generation of the Smart BMS 12200, designed for the older Smart Lithium line, now built specifically for NG batteries. Carries over the same core functionality, including alternator charging, support for 12-volt systems, built-in current limiting, one-way charging from the alternator to protect it from backfeed, and Bluetooth connectivity for monitoring through VictronConnect. The VE Bus BMS NG and small BMS NG are available now, with a VE Bus BMS NG CAN version expected later this year. On the certification side, Victron has achieved both UL 2054 and IEC 62619 certifications for lithium NG batteries when paired with a Lynx BMS NG. The UL 2054 specifically evaluates the battery pack, including its casing and protective circuitry, to reduce the risk of fire or explosion during operation. UL 1973 and UL 9540A certifications are in progress as well, with a few battery models still pending approval. These certifications are important for RVIA compliance because the RVIA requires UL-listed electrical equipment to meet nationally recognized safety standards for RV certification and labeling. This applies particularly to OEM, RV, and van manufacturers seeking dealership contracts, since dealers typically require RVIA certification. All right, moving on here. Victron is continuing to expand the lineup of their Orion DC-to-DC chargers with several exciting updates on the way. We're expecting the next iterations of the Orion XS series to arrive mid to late this year, including a 70 amp model, as well as a 48-volt capable Orion XS. These additions will really broaden the flexibility of the XS platform across different system voltages and applications. There have also been rumors circulating about a future 200 amp Orion XS. And while we don't have any confirmed details yet, it's definitely something to keep an eye out for. Another major update coming later this year is the addition of an emergency starter charge feature to the Orion XS. This has been a highly requested capability, so it's great to see Victron integrating it directly into the Orion XS line. Finally, Victron is expanding the non-isolated TR Smart DC-to-DC charger lineup as well. One of the standout additions is a new 48 to 12 60 amp model, which is especially useful for powering substantial 12-volt loads in an otherwise 48-volt system. Up until now, the largest DC-to-DC converter in this category was limited to 30 amps. All right, and BlueSmart Chargers. Victron is finally introducing 48-volt and 36-volt Smart IP43 BlueSmart Chargers. Up until now, there haven't been any 48-volt AC to DC chargers available in Victron's lineup, so this is a significant and much anticipated addition. These new models are expected to launch sometime in Q1. There have also been a few updates to the BlueSmart Chargers. Newer units produced since March of last year now include an improved strain relief design for added durability and cable support. Additionally, they've introduced a button lock feature to prevent accidental changes to charger settings. This update applies across the BlueSmart IP65, IP22, and Smart IP43 charger ranges, adding an extra layer of protection and user confidence. So a few additional product updates. First, the Victron Auto Transformer lineup has expanded with a new 50 amp model. This upgraded version features 55% more feed-through current than its predecessor in the same enclosure. The Multi-RS 486000 is now available, and this is a compact 6000 VA inverter with a 100 amp charger designed primarily for marine applications. Unlike other RS models, it does not include a built-in MPPT. That makes it more cost-effective options for systems that don't require solar. Currently, it's available in 230-volt single-phase input and output only. Victron's also introduced the Multi-RS 19 and HS 19. These are 19-inch rack-mount inverter charger combinations with integrated solar charge controllers, making installation much quicker and cleaner. The Multi-RS 19 is a 48-volt single-phase 6 kVA unit with dual MPPT trackers built in, while the HS19 is a 3-phase model with 4 MPPT trackers, and both are currently 230 volt only. And finally, Victron has introduced a new solar monitoring device, the SolarSense 750. This is a wireless Bluetooth device that measures solar radiance and available PV power. It integrates with VictronConnect and GX devices and can estimate daily minimum and maximum solar production as well as daily yield. It can also be used as a pilot device, helping you evaluate panel orientation, placement, seasonal performance before finalizing a system design. And with that, I'll hand it over to Peter for some software updates.
Dan, thank you. With the addition of the switch pane, digital switching now lives on your GX touchscreen. Let's take a quick look at some of the things you can control. Referencing the screenshot in the top left, we can set temperature set points for climate control in various spaces, toggle lighting on and off, dim our living room lights to set the mood, and even set our fish tank filter pump to auto so we don't have to think about it. We can customize the switch pane with 3 types of outputs: a momentary, latching, and dimmable. Hey, Kaza, let's take a quick poll here. What are some of the things you'd like to be able to control from a GX touchscreen? Take a little bit of a pause here.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. We just launched a poll with a few options in terms of what you'd want to control from a touch display. We'd be really interested to hear what you guys think, because it's pretty clear Victron launched their basic switch pane functionality last year, and that gave us the ability to, toggle lights on and off. Soon thereafter, the ability to dim lights. Now with this Shelly control, the ability to control RGBW, and this screenshot here of a GX device with some of these other possibilities. I mean, HVAC control, there's one in here, PV orientation control, ventilation modes, and different things. It's pretty clear that they certainly intend to continue growing the capabilities to allow for complete system monitoring and control from a GX device. So yeah, appreciate you guys participating in that. And if you selected other, or if you didn't see an option in the poll, would be interested to hear from you in the chat in terms of what you'd like to see next.
All right. We appreciate that participation here. It's always good for us to hear how y'all are customizing your Victron systems. Now let's talk about the Shelly Plus RGBW PM controller. This is now supported to use with your GX device, allowing control of RGBW LED strips from the GX screen. You will find the switch pane in the top left corner of the GX touch display, and this is where your controls will live. This LED controller requires a steady 12 or 24 volt power source. Be sure to use a DC to DC converter or an AC DC power supply to ensure it operates without issue. With one Shelly controller, you can control up to 4 amps per channel and 10 amps total. You can use the color wheel to change colors and save preset lighting scenes. Connecting to your GX device requires it and the Shelly to be on the same network, or the Shelly can be connected to the GX's local Wi-Fi signal. It's your choice. Currently in beta, VictronConnect version 6.30 for iOS and Android is getting some updates that really expand our view of the system and the data we can see without leaving the app. When viewing a VRM connected installation, there are 3 new views: System, Data, and Devices. System View gives us the system overview, showing how power is moving throughout the system. This is a similar view to what we see in the dashboard when we're using VRM in the browser. We see our charge devices, DC loads, AC loads, and battery state of charge. We even have access to the inverter charger controls, allowing us to set the input current limit and mode of the unit. The data view gives us some basic system overview graphs like solar production, consumption, and shore power data over time. The devices view shows us the GX connected devices. After logging into a device, we can update the firmware, settings, and view the history data points as if we were on site with the installation. The real treat in this view is access to the remote console directly inside the app. No need to transition to a browser now. Keep in mind, these new views don't replace the browser-based VRM. They present system info quickly, all within the app. For more in-depth troubleshooting, the browser-based VRM is still my tool of choice. The app will auto-update its device firmware library when internet is available. As always, this allows you to update local devices without an internet connection. Now, when updating firmware, the changelog will display right on the update page, bug fixes and upgrades listed. Another exciting ability coming soon is batch programming. This allows you to update firmware and settings for multiple units at one time. This can be a real time saver for folks who deploy multiple of the same units, like MPPTs or Orion XSs. Batch updates support VE Direct and Bluetooth connected devices. Data history is also getting some updates. Trends in history will be a little more digestible and easier to understand and unpack, either in the app or exported and saved. And here's another little clever integration: Victron Connect for Android Auto. Android Auto is an OS that some EVs use for their display. Now you can access your Victron devices on the EV screen, alerting you of system alarms and notifications. You can add your devices here for key information at a quick glance. Now, for some VRM updates. By now, many of you have likely used the VRM AI assistant. This is for the browser-based VRM. You will find the button on an installation's advanced page at the bottom right corner, just like on this slide, circled in pink. With a prompt, this assistant generates custom data graphs, allowing you to view specific information from discrete devices overlaid on a single graph. Now, this assistant has the ability to answer VRM documentation questions and system summaries, helping you create a tailored VRM experience. For example, how do I set up an alarm for a temperature sensor? Or what day had the most PV yield last month? For accounts with more than 100 systems connected, two-factor authentication will now be mandatory, keeping your and your client's data secure. And with that, I'll pass it over to Kaza. He's going to talk a little bit more about the software integrator program.
Thanks, Peter. So the Victron Software Integrator Program was created to accelerate the development of practical, customized solutions that bridge the Victron ecosystem with some of these other integrations, custom monitoring, and automation platforms. A few examples of what a software integrator might do include using the VRM API to send data to a custom dashboard, or tapping into the Bluetooth messaging of a Victron device and placing this data alongside other, say, vehicle telematics data for fleet monitoring. Adding a page on the GX Touch to display custom tiles with data like shore power quality or generator fuel usage estimates, or perhaps working on a new RVC device integration, like how you can view data on a touchscreen from a sea-level Sol tank monitor or Arco Zeus alternator regulator. Really, the sky's the limit with Victron, and it's not a matter of can we do it, but how do we want to do it? And I'm proud to announce that our team is a member of the Software Integrator Program. So let us know if you have an out-of-the-box idea or custom use case we may be able to help with. Okay, now let's talk microgrids. What is a microgrid and how is it different from other battery-based energy systems? The definition of a microgrid varies depending on who you ask. Our favorite definition comes from the Advanced Microgrid Design course offered by SEI, Solar Energy International, which states a microgrid includes interconnected power generation, energy storage, and loads shared by multiple buildings, sites, or services contained within a clearly defined electrical boundary. They go on to say that a microgrid may be grid connected, but it has the ability to operate independently in what's called island mode when the utility grid is not present or offline. Now, when we talk about microgrids in the context of using Victron equipment, the idea is that we can now allow smaller systems to work together in parallel to support larger load demands. For example, you might have a trailer with an energy system designed to provide power for a small event. Let's say you build a few more trailers so that you can support other small events that are happening. But then an opportunity to support a large event arises. Well, now you can take all of these smaller trailers and combine them in parallel so that you can provide sufficient power to support the larger load demand of this larger event. Other examples where this microgrid capability might be useful include remote communities, construction sites, disaster relief, command centers, data centers, military FOBs, the list goes on. So the biggest takeaway here is that Victron systems can now scale to be much larger while also allowing for considerable redundancy, because if one power bank drops offline, you have the other power banks running to keep the lights on. In this example, we have a traditional AC generator in the top right corner with a Victron system there to supplement. Let's say an industrial campus wants to expand without needing to completely revamp their energy system. Well, now you can drop in these additional power banks, some utilizing solar and others with a DC generator backup. And all will work together to support the same AC load requirement. And the icing on the cake is that you do not need to run additional communications cables to get these power banks in sync. Traditionally, microgrids utilize a complex and expensive energy management system, or microgrid controller, like you see in the center of the screen here, to keep all of the nodes in the network on the same page. Kind of like a GX device, except instead of managing one system, the EMS manages multiple independent systems like those shown in this example. With Victron, instead of requiring this additional management overhead, the power banks are actually able to synchronize with each other based on AC frequency and voltage. What really makes this possible is a feature called hybrid droop mode, which adjusts power output based on frequency and voltage deviations. For example, as a load increases, the frequency drops and the inverter increases its power output accordingly. So each inverter can respond independently to the grid conditions, allowing them to share loads proportionally based on the droop characteristics. This is a test published by Victron that shows all of this in action. They set up 4 power banks to support a 3-phase system. 2 power banks rated for 45 kVA. These are represented in graphs A1 and A2. And 2 power banks rated for 90 kVA, graphs B1 and B2. You'll notice that the main difference in these graphs is the number of colored lines, where each line represents a single inverter. So you have 3 inverters in each A graph and 6 inverters in each B graph. They then applied a 37 kilowatt load to each phase. So that's about 111 kilowatts in total. And without any additional communications cables between these power banks, they all adjusted their output so that it was proportional, not only across each power bank, but across each inverter within each system. So a quick note that these numbers are rounded. And so if you add up the numbers in our A graphs and B graphs, they're not going to equal 111 kilowatts exactly. But look at how all the lines match up to show that every inverter in this microgrid, all 18 of them, are outputting equally at around 6 kilowatts. And also that power banks B1 and B2, because they are twice the size as A1 and A2, are automatically outputting twice as much power. So it's proportional. All inverters are being loaded equally, which means no one point in the system is being overly stressed. And that's important, of course, because overstress could lead to premature failure. Victron has some of the most robust and reliable components out there. And this test demonstrates that not just at the component level, but at the system level, they have this same commitment to reliability. And with that, we'll open it up for Q&A. If you could, we will get to questions in the chat, but we'd love if you wouldn't mind raising your hand. That way we can have a conversation. Well, perhaps, Dan, while we're waiting, if anybody does end up raising their hand, we can get at some of the questions that have been posed in the chat here.
Yeah, David asked about the Multi+2 4K5 and 6K5. Are those going to come out in 120 volt 50 amp for fifth wheels? I know they'll for sure be coming out in 120 volts. Whether or not they're making a 2x120 version of those new variations, I don't know for certain. That would be nice, but at this point, I understand there will be 120 volt single phase versions coming either later this year, sometime in the future. Jeff had a question here about the microgrids.
Can you describe the physical topology of these microgrids? They cascade so that the output of one inverter feeds the input of the next inverter. No. So the output wouldn't feed the input. The outputs of these inverter systems or power banks would all be parallel together. Yeah, do they? I'm not entirely sure. Cascade. You want to come off mute, Jeff, and we can try to get to the bottom of what you're asking.
You might need to unmute him.
Hi, Kaza, Peter, and Dan.
Hey, Jeffrey.
Great presentation. This has been a good time. I know that there are several ways that these microgrids can be built. I know that there is a version where one inverter cascades into another by feeding the output of one inverter, feeds the input of another inverter, and so they cascade down. And then there's a different type where they are just paralleled. And I understood that the paralleled version does need the communication cables. So I'm just learning, and this could be a new feature that I'm just not understanding yet.
It is, yeah. So this is a brand new feature, this hybrid droop mode, and it allows for these paralleled outputs based on the deviations of frequency and voltage to dynamically respond these various power banks within a parallel system. They can dynamically respond to the load demand and not just synchronize in terms of frequency, but also equalize in terms of output across each inverter.
How is this enabled? Like how do I turn this feature on?
Yeah, so from what I understand right now, this is the latest firmware within VE config. There is a microgrid assistant. So we had a slide earlier that showed some of the microgrid controls and configuration. I don't know that in full is completely available yet. It's a very new feature, but it sounds like the latest firmware of VE config, you can use a microgrid assistant to get at some of this. This hybrid droop piece, that's the newest feature. So Victron has done some stuff with microgrids for a little while now, but this hybrid droop is the newest feature. So in terms of whether or not that is actually available at this moment, I see we got Aaron. I know that he's either on a flight or about to catch one. Aaron from Victron. Aaron, if you are online, if you wouldn't mind coming off mute, maybe you have a little insight in terms of this hybrid droop and whether or not that's available right now or if that's still being developed. Yeah, it might be a long shot. I don't know if he's able to come off mute. But that's the latest info we got right now. We just saw a message from him. He's going to look into the hybrid droop. Aaron sent a message in the chat, so we can provide more info on that, Jeffrey. Cool. Any other questions in the chat, Dan?
See, Ken asked about any plans for Truma integration. I don't know about that, about any like native integration. Not off the top of my head. We could look into that though.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about that either. I wouldn't be surprised if it comes around sooner or later, but I'm not aware of any active work being done on that.
I think that's about it.
About it for questions. Cool.
As far as, let's see, James asked about updates as far as turnaround time for trekMounts once plans are approved.
Turnaround times for trekMount. So let's see. Once the plans are approved, we're at about a 1 to 2 week turnaround right now. And by plans being approved, that's depending on what type of trekMount you order. If it's a trekMount Solo where you're like, hey, I've got my own components that I want to mount to the bracket. Well, what we do is get a list of those components that you plan on using, and then we mock it up in CAD so that you have a 3D model of what it's going to look like with the components that you plan on using. One, we want to make sure that the components you plan using are going to work, and that if there are components that aren't going to work, that you're well aware of that before receiving trekMount. So we do that. We mock it up in CAD. We get you a 3D model, and then upon approval of that, then we proceed with production and getting it shipped out to you.
When will Shelly modules be available? Are we going to offer Shelly modules?
Maybe we're considering it right now. You can get Shelly modules, I think, directly from the Shelly site. I think they're pretty readily available. So yeah, we don't carry those currently, but are certainly looking into it.
And I see Kenny asked about Android Auto. Is that Bluetooth to be able to see the Victron display? It's my understanding it's either wireless or through a USB cable, similar to like Apple CarPlay. And then Kenny also asked, do you see that message there, Kaza?
Oh yeah, let's see. Kenny, interested to reach out, give a rebrief of that initial thought. Yeah, Kenny. So the first 5 minutes, we were just describing a trekMount and the options that are available. We've got trekMount Solo, which is bracket only, so that you can wire it yourself up on a bench and then deploy it. We've got trekMount Ready, which is fully wired, programmed, tested. So it's as plug and play as you can get when it comes to a Victron system. And then we've got trekMount OEM, and that is service where we will design and engineer and do the actual production of a custom trekMount, typically for OEMs who they may have a specific use case or a specific space that they want to fit this system in. So we'll work with you to figure out, well, what does that space look like? What are the appropriate components? And then get you a plug and play, ready to go system.
Then Jeff said, seeing that Victron is doing a big microgrid display in the Czech Republic this summer, which is, I think, a really good segue.
That's a great segue. So Dan, if you wouldn't mind dropping, we've got a gift for you guys in the chat. Really appreciate y'all joining us for these webinars. It makes it worthwhile for us to host them. So the segue that Dan just referred to is Tron Land Festival. So this is what Jeffrey mentioned in the chat here. This is happening in the Czech Republic, and this is really interesting, really exciting. I know Victron has talked about doing this for a little while now, and so it'll be a big festival, workshops, live music, different demos and expert talks, and just knowledge sharing in general. And this is happening in the Czech Republic, so I'm not sure how many of our U.S. brothers and sisters are going to be able to attend this one, but it's exciting to see. It's exciting to see because we can hopefully expect if Victron is hosting a festival like this in the Czech Republic, then it won't be long before they're hosting one in the U.S. as well. And one last thought for everybody here: we're going to host a VRM open office hours here. Let's see, we don't have the date on the site. I think March 6th is what we decided on. If that's a Friday, a couple weeks from now. March 6th, details will be, we'll drop a registration link in the chat, and you can get there with this QR code as well. But this is an open office hours. We've had a number of folks reach out and say they want to kind of do an overview of VRM. And we do have a VRM webinar on our YouTube channel where we do quite a deep dive into it. But this is going to be more of an open forum, right? So we're not really going to structure it and have a big presentation. It's more so, hey, bring whatever questions you have related to VRM, features around it, or how to do advanced troubleshooting in there, or commission a system from the beginning within VRM. Whatever questions you have, you bring those, and we open the doors to talk about it. But with that, that's our presentation for today. So we really appreciate you guys joining us, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.